Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about the Metroid Prime 4 situation, or to be more clear, the future of the Metroid Prime series. Right now, many are questioning the future of the series. Many are in doubt that there will be another Metroid Prime. And the reason for that is because, well, we've just gotten updated financial data from Nintendo about their fiscal year that just ended on March 31st of 2026, and this gives us a better understanding of the sales of Metroid Prime 4. Sort of. But basically, it's not the most amazing news. And so, what does this mean for the future of the series? I do think it means something. I don't think it means the end. And so we're going to be talking about why it's likely not the end of the Metroid Prime series, but also how Nintendo's going to adjust moving forward for the Metroid Prime series. That's what we're getting into today. So sit back, hear me out, and let me know what you think at the end of the video in the comments below. So going back a few months, when we got the third quarterly results for Nintendo's financial year, we did not see that Metroid Prime 4 was on the million seller list, so people were thinking that Metroid Prime 4 didn't even hit 1 million copies sold. However, Stephen Totillo said this: following some consternation about neither the Switch nor Switch 2 versions of Metroid Prime 4 making Nintendo's million seller list for the period ending December 31st, a Nintendo rep told me today that combined sales of those two versions have in fact passed 1 million copies. So we got confirmation here that Metroid Prime 4 did sell over 1 million copies just with both versions combined, the Switch 2 edition and the Switch 1 version. And even Kiwi Talks at the time had mentioned that he had heard estimates around a 1.5 million range, although that has not been fully verified. At least though we know that Metroid Prime 4 sales are somewhere between 1 and 2 million copies. But there was an optimism, or a hope, that when we would get the full financial results for the fiscal year, with a few more months of sales data there, we would see at least one of the versions of Metroid Prime 4 eclipse 1 million copies sold. Well, looking at Nintendo's financial data for this fiscal year, Metroid Prime 4 is not on the list of million sellers for the year. And so this would mean that neither version has passed 1 million copies. That's the suggestion. We've also heard about some price drops for Metroid Prime 4 from different retailers. The suggestion being that the game is not selling that well, so different retailers are trying their best to get it out there into the hands of others out of stock. And so the overall conclusion here is that Metroid Prime 4 does not seem to have that much momentum after its initial sales in December. And even those initial sales in December were not that extremely successful. Now, at least getting over 1 million copies, that's still pretty good compared to most games. That still means Metroid Prime 4 sells better than most games out there. And if Metroid Prime 4 is over 1.5 million, even better. But Metroid Prime 4 is not a budget title. Metroid Prime 4 is one of the most ambitious titles Nintendo's put out there. With Retro Studios, their developer in the West in Texas, there are costs involved with that, and the long years of development, and the huge efforts they put into the visuals and all. This is clearly one of Nintendo's most expensive titles. And it has only sold somewhere over 1 million copies, less than 2 million. This likely means that Metroid Prime 4 was not profitable for Nintendo. Now, there are other factors to consider here. Metroid Prime 4 is a visual showcase, and so there's meaning in that. Showing a beautiful game like this running on Switch 2, that can help with Switch 2 sales, that helps with marketing and presentation of that. Metroid Prime 4 appeals to a different type of audience than your typical Nintendo fan as well, and so that's also potentially bringing in more people into the fold, into the Nintendo ecosystem. There was some merchandise sales with the amiibos, the art book, those different things. Metroid Prime 4 certainly helped out with sales, and of course other people went back to play other Metroid games in lead up to Metroid Prime 4. So there are these other little factors here that would certainly lead to more money being made by Nintendo, and so only considering just the Metroid Prime 4 sales itself wouldn't tell a whole story. But regardless, this isn't good. And I'm saying that as a big defender of Metroid Prime 4. When Metroid Prime 4 came out, or even before that, when previews came out, there was so much negativity surrounding coverage of the game. And I do think a lot of this, and this is just me telling you what I honestly believe, there was a significant focus on negative headlines, because negative headlines in general do tend to generate more clicks. And it's not to say that a lot of the criticisms weren't valid and weren't honest. I do think a lot of people truly did have issues with Metroid Prime 4, but I do think that this became far more of this weird social media dynamic as opposed to the true story of what the game is, and I don't think that benefited Metroid Prime 4. Like, we've seen for other games, like the Pokemon series, for example, where there's so much negativity surrounding the series, and the games still sell incredible numbers. But Pokemon as a brand is like the most powerful force that's attached to Nintendo here. You can't really stop Pokemon. Metroid, on the other hand, is on the opposite side of things. Metroid is trying to build an audience. Pokemon has had the audience for decades. And so my impression is that this huge negativity train did impact sales. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the critical acclaim of the game I also don't think helped. I do think the game is underrated. I don't think the game deserves to be in the high 70s on Metacritic. I think it should maybe be perhaps in the low 80s, mid 80s at best. Still lower than Metroid Prime 1, I agree, it's not the best Metroid Prime game in the series, but I still think it's a fun Metroid Prime game. It still was my favorite experience of 2025, in large part because of how huge of a Metroid fan I am, although I also did really love Donkey Kong Bonanza, and that is far more widely praised by people. But the point is, these things didn't help. Metroid Prime 4 could have been a better game, and maybe if Nintendo had truly hit it out of the park with Metroid Prime 4, we'll be talking about a different sales situation here. The negativity wouldn't have been as prevalent. The critical acclaim would have been better. There might have been momentum swinging in a different direction. But the reality of the situation is this. Metroid Prime 4 took many years to come out, fell below the expectations of most when it did come out, and did not sell close to enough to make up for the amount of investment it took Nintendo to get this game out there. Those are the facts. Now, does that mean Nintendo is done with the Metroid Prime series? No, I do not think they are done with the Metroid Prime series. The Prime 4 producer has actually put out several hints that there is a planned future for the Metroid Prime series with Tanabe about the Metroid Prime series, and here he talks about Tachoya and the 12 other Lemorne, carrying with them miniature teleporters to return home, were sent to every planet across multiple universes to search for the chosen one of the prophecy. Sadly, they were unable to find said chosen one, and all died in obscurity at their respective locations. This does mean, however, that there are still 11 teleporters in existence. It would be hard to create individual stories for all of them, but I think that still leaves the door open for exploring a few of them in the future. So this is just one of the many things that Tanabe included in Metroid Prime 4 to set up future installments, as in more than one after this. There was a plan to continue going for a long time. And we've talked about this part recently, actually we've talked about it multiple times, but Tanabe also talked about how he designed Sylux to be a rival with Samus, a serious threat that will be dealt with moving forward. Here, consequently, the score between Sylux and Samus has yet to be settled. However, this game took longer to finish than expected, and it's been decided that I will not be involved in the production of the series moving forward. Therefore, while there are no plans for a sequel, I hope that Miss Tabata and Retro Studios can one day bring this story to a close. So there is a suggestion here that Miss Tabata will become the producer of the series, the lead producer of the series moving forward, and that they want Sylux and the teleporters of Lemorne to be involved with the story. So clearly there have been discussions and thoughts about what to do with the series, but they're also not confirming that they're going to make a Metroid Prime 5. So yeah, it is still somewhat in question. There are rumors that Metroid Prime 5 is in the works to some extent, but there is no confirmation, and those rumors, well, there's certainly reason to be dubious. But I put out a poll a few months back, and I asked, for Metroid games in general, what is it that you think most holds the series back from selling more? Now keep in mind, a few months back, the overall conversation and consideration was mostly about the Metroid Prime series, but still this would also include the 2D Metroid series. And here were the choices I put on for the poll. Not cute or relaxing like Pokemon and Animal Crossing. being in first person or 2D just isn't that appealing to many. It needs that secret sauce, or the one that won by a significant margin with the 2,200 votes that I got for this poll. 77% said this. It just needs more consistent quality releases and better marketing. So if you actually think about it, Nintendo has actually been doing a good job in terms of consistency for the Metroid Prime series over the last few years. Metroid Dread came out in 2021, Metroid Prime Remastered came out in 2023, and Metroid Prime 4 came out last December, 2025. So if we get another Metroid game in 2027, getting a Metroid game every 2 years, I think that's a pretty good flow. I think that's pretty consistent. And Metroid Dread was actually extremely successful, sold over 3 million copies. Nintendo definitely marketed that game well. Metroid Prime Remastered, on the other hand, didn't sell over 3 million copies. We didn't even hear about it eclipsing 2, just somewhere over 1 million, similar to Metroid Prime 4. But that game did have the critical acclaim. It's one of the highest reviewed games on the Nintendo Switch. There was pretty much only positivity about this release from people online. There wasn't like this negativity storm surrounding the game, and yet Metroid Prime Remastered, being one of the most ambitious remasters we've ever seen from Nintendo, with extremely high reviews, didn't get the 2 million copies sold, which I find very odd. Metroid Prime is considered to be one of the greatest games ever, but I do wonder if maybe the reason behind that is because Nintendo just didn't market it well, because they just shadow dropped it in a February Nintendo Direct. There were other games coming out during that period of time. There was a lot of conversation about Tears of the Kingdom shortly after. And even in the Direct, it kind of just came out by surprise. It didn't feel like they gave it this big special moment. And I also kind of feel that way about Metroid Prime 4 in hindsight. Like, I was continually hoping that Nintendo would do their best to help to push Metroid Prime 4, this very expensive game that I believed would be very good, and is good, but not very good, below expectation. I thought they would do more to push it. And there was marketing. They did give us something like a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. They gave us a significant overview trailer that clearly could have been the content for a Nintendo Direct, but they didn't brand it as a Nintendo Direct. They didn't expand it just a little bit more to make it feel like a proper game-specific Nintendo Direct. And I wonder about that a little bit. Especially now after the recent Star Fox reveal. You see the love and attention Nintendo's giving to Star Fox here. They have a dedicated Direct for it. You have Miyamoto and Koizumi coming out and speaking on the history of the series, and they're giving Star Fox all this huge spotlight right now. And then you also think about how they handled things for Donkey Kong, how they had this redesign, how they gave him such a big focus. Bonanza's doing extremely well from a sales perspective. And so I'm just kind of left thinking, what if Nintendo had treated Metroid the way they've treated Star Fox and Donkey Kong? Now, I think you could argue that they did give Metroid that attention with Metroid Dread. And I don't think 2D Metroid's dying. That makes no sense. The 2D Metroid series is far lower budget, is not as expensive to make, is selling really well, reviews well. I expect the next 2D Metroid to be announced relatively soon. Most likely, that's the next Metroid game that's going to be announced. But the way Nintendo has handled the 3D Metroid Prime games leaves something to be desired. I had issues with the way they marketed Metroid Prime Remastered, and, I do think they could have done more for Metroid Prime 4. But this is where we're at. So, what can Nintendo do to move forward with this series? Well, what they have to do is be consistent, as we talked about earlier. We've actually heard from Kiwi Talks that apparently there have been internal conversations about what they can do for the series, and one of the points is that they need to be more consistent, and they do seem to be working towards that. So, having a knee-jerk reaction with the sales of Metroid Prime 4 and not making Metroid Prime 5 when they already have plans for one, and they already have a framework. They built at Retro Studios for years, they have this engine, they've gone reacquainted with the Metroid Prime series. They can build another Metroid Prime a lot more easily than Prime 4, with a much quicker turnaround, and with lessons learned from the mistakes of Metroid Prime 4. So this next game, likely, will not take nearly as long, will be cheaper to make, will be easier to make, and they have an advantage with making a better game. So Metroid Prime 5 is not going to be as risky of an investment. But also, by continuing and maintaining things, you're helping to build a little bit more momentum here, when Metroid Prime 5 is announced and they start promoting that, there are going to be people who will want to go back and play Metroid Prime 4. Helping to reduce a bit of your losses here, more people will then go and buy the game, especially if there's this connection with the story, as Tanabe has clearly set up. But there are other little things. Maybe Silex will be added to Smash Brothers, and perhaps it could have a similar effect as to what we saw with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which came out in the 1st December of the Switch 1, similar to Prime 4. But Pyra and Mithra certainly created a lot of conversation in Smash Brothers and led to more Xenoblade Chronicles 2 sales. Maybe they could happen for Metroid Prime 4 as well with a Silex involvement. Little things like this can get more people to pick up the game, and so that can help to cut Nintendo's losses here more so. But about Metroid Prime 5, about what they can do with the series itself, Tanabe is retiring, so there's going to be someone else at the helm. Risa Tabata seems to be the person in line, but also Retro Studios may be a little bit more involved with their own choices, and the things I think they should adjust upon. 1, go back to having an interwoven world. I'm not against having kind of like this sandbox, like what we saw with Soul Valley, but everything needs to feel better interconnected. I don't want to have these big zones and there's just like these long periods of time getting from one point to another. There's gotta be shortcuts at least. I want to feel like this is a proper maze with a lot to discover. And on the note of discovery, they gotta dial back on the tutorial system. That was annoying. And you know, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. They included Soul Valley, this open area. They included the Federation with all the voice acting, and they included this very hand-holdy tutorial system, all in an effort to get more people to play Metroid Prime 4, and it seems to have had an adverse effect. I do believe there should be accessibility options, but like many other games, just have a mode where it's just easier to get through the experience if you're just trying to walk through the world and enjoy the narrative. Have that as a mode. But if you're picking a normal or tougher difficulty, there shouldn't be that level of hand-holding. Just allow us to find things and discover, and maybe just have an optional hint system that we can choose to look at, and that's it. I don't think scanning should go away, but I do think it should be reduced and made less cumbersome. I think a lot of people get thrown off when they go into a room and they see dozens upon dozens of things to scan, and they have to scan everything before progressing. Or you just don't scan any of it, and so you miss out on key, interesting details. And my biggest point here is to just go all in on what Metroid is and be proud of it. I feel like one of the issues with the Metroid series is that they teeter between wanting to be very Nintendo and appealing to a large audience, and also being what Metroid is, which is darker, scarier, tougher. And I think in order for Nintendo to truly succeed with Metroid here, they just have to buy into what it is. I'm not saying it has to become a horror game, but if there are horror elements, let that happen. Go all in on that. Don't hold back. Metroid Dread was extremely successful, and it had that really big, suspenseful, dreadful element with the Emmy. Some of the best parts of Metroid Prime 4 are the scariest parts. Go all in on that. If there's going to be a Metroid movie, which there are rumors of there going to be one, don't be afraid to make it scary. That's a big part of what Metroid is about. Metroid's inspired by the movie Alien, a horror movie. Like, it's just part of what Metroid is. So believe in it. Go all in on it. And stay consistent. And because they have this belief, yeah, use a movie to help promote the brand. Have a direct where you have your executives on stage glowing about the game, talking about its history and the coolness of this next one, like they've done with Donkey Kong, like they've done with Star Fox. And I think the success will be even greater. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe if you haven't already. But I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.